All right, good morning, everyone. And once again, I would like to introduce and welcome Mr. Bill Gardner to our chat this morning, our Tuesday, actually not Tuesday talk, it's our it's a little mini course we're having on cybersecurity. He is an assistant professor of cyber forensics and security at Marshall. His research focuses on motivations of online criminals, cybersecurity, cyber warfare, and penetration testing. He is a co-author of the books Google Hacking for Penetration Testers and Building an Information Security Awareness Program, Defending Against Social Engineering and Technical Threats. His most recent publications are Social Engineering and Russian Nonlinear Warfare in the Journal of Applied Digital Evidence, and I Did What I Believe Is Right, a study of neutralizations among anonymous operation participants in the Journal of Qualitative Criminology. Again, Mr. Bill Gardner, thank you for being here, and we're looking forward to today's session, and I'm going to turn it over to you now.
It's my pleasure. Thank you all for being here. Today, I thought I would kind of take a little bit of a left turn and talk about basically what's going on in the world right now with the Russian incursion, or actually invasion, of the Ukraine. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Russian, what's non-kinetic warfare or hybrid warfare, the things that they do before they attack. We're going to look at a case study of the DNC hack specifically. So that sounds very jumbled, but I swear it will make sense once I get started. Does anyone have any questions lingering from last week? Okay, let's see if I can share my screen here. I think I remember.
Let me make you hold on.
I did want to say, in relation to your part one, it was very helpful to have the motivation of attackers and to know kind of where that all lines up, and when we talk about cybersecurity, where we fit into that,
right.
where we feel as personally about being hacked, but then you have just, and so timely, have given us such a good. I just thought those motivations that you gave that were helpful to kind of get clear in our thought process where we are. And so that's what I guess leads into your today.
Well, today I want to talk about this. We're going to talk about basically cyber warfare, and we want to talk about how we as individuals fit into that as well. And so let me share my screen. Hang on a second. For Pete's sake, give me just a moment. That's
okay. I made you co-host, so you should.
Yeah, I need to move this over to another screen.
Okay, we're good.
Everything is harder than it should be this morning for some reason. I think it's lack of caffeine.
We're with you.
Let me turn off my Teams before I start getting phone calls in the middle of this. People were already sending me text messages, and I was like, you can't do that. I'm getting ready to present.
I was doing a class last night, and all of a sudden on my Zoom, I had so many things open, and all of a sudden my screen was just full. I couldn't, and I had a moment like
Yeah, my wife sent me a message, and I'm like, I got to present, so you may want to refrain from sending me a message moving forward. But anyway, I'm sure you all don't want to hear about the cats. She sends me messages about what the cats did today. I'm like, that's interesting. So this is a case study. We're looking at Russian nonlinear warfare. Actually, this is based upon a study that was published in the Journal of Applied Digital Forensics. And you can find that online if you're interested, or I can circulate the paper. In this case, we're particularly looking at things that happened during 2008, where information was taken from the Democratic National Committee by Russian operatives, and then spread around and publicized. And they were emails between within the DNC and also the campaigns at the time, presidential campaigns in specifically. And it happened, I guess it got publicized in the middle of the Democratic National Convention. And I think that was for impact. Pretty sure Russia was behind the hack, in that it may not be Russian government forces. It could have been someone who was working as what they call patriotic hackers or third-party hackers, or just somebody who wanted to break into something for funsies. But then it turns into cyber warfare because it was used by one nation state as an advantage to disrupt the elections of another nation state. And that's the reason it falls into cyber warfare. And it sort of falls into hacktivism as well. One of the most well-known cyber campaigns. Sorry, again, I'm not as I thought I was all ready to go, and I realized I don't have my notes. One of the most well-known cyber campaigns is the one against. Now I'm having brain freeze, against Estonia. They had these statues that were left behind during the Russian occupation in the Eastern Bloc, Russian war heroes. Well, the Estonians wanted to move it from their town squares to a local cemetery, which made the Russians rather angry. In this case, what the Russians did was they took the Estonia offline for several days, which means no one could bank. They couldn't get money out of their bank. They couldn't contact the local authorities. They were able, if they were using voice over IP phones, they weren't able to make phone calls. So basically, it was just basically digitally wiped off the map. And it was in protest of the decision to move this Russian war hero statue from the town square of the capital of Estonia to a local cemetery, which seems kind of petty, but that's what it was about. In the case of the Georgia incursion, we saw massive cyber attacks, taking down websites, disrupting communication networks, both civil and military, before tanks ever rolled into Georgia, excuse me. This is also an example of the long line of incursions that the Russians have engaged in after the collapse of the Soviet Union, where they're trying to take back territory in hopes that they can revitalize the glories of the Soviet Union. So specifically, the way this was done was through social engineering. There's a lot of different names for this. Email hacking, and we talked a little about when you get something, an email, be suspicious of it. Make sure you know where a link is going before you open it. Or if you're getting it from your bank or your credit card company, actually go to their site, the link that you know is good. Actually go to truist.com or wherever it is and check to see if there is an issue with your account. If you click on the link, it's going to take you to a website that looks just like the Truist account. You're going to log in, it's going to steal your credentials and actually log you into the legitimate site. So you will never have any idea that your credentials have been taken. Phishing, this is phone-based phishing. So calling people on the phone, you say something like, I'm doing a survey, and they start asking you questions. What's the strongest password that you've made up? Then I'll also ask you some of the things to reset your passwords. What was your first car, make and model? What's your mother's maiden name? Those sorts of things happen through phishing, or they may call and say that they're trying to sell some updated cybersecurity software, and they want to know what you currently own. What kind of antivirus do you have? What kind of IDS, IPS, all these software controls around cybersecurity do you own currently. And it's a way that they can sort of digitally case a target before actually attacking it. Smishing, which is text-based phishing. So one of the things that I've seen that's been prevalent is your Amazon order is confirmed as a special gift. We're going to give you $10 off your next Amazon account. And so you click on that text message, or they're trying to get you to tick on cloud. Can talk. Click on a text message. What was the one? Oh, AT&T. They sort of knew when all the AT&T bills went out and about the time that people paid them. So it would say, thank you for paying your bill. To confirm your payment, to click on this link. And that's another phishing attack that's been prevalent. Impersonation, which is in-person deception. We do some of this in my practice, where you show up and you say you're there to fix the phones, you're there to fix the printers, or we did a social engineering assessment a few years ago where I actually used my students, and they would go in and they would be the copy repairmen or repair persons. And the first time we sent somebody in, they're like, "Where have you been? We've been waiting for you to get here." He was able to basically walk through their entire environment. He actually sat down and fixed a couple of copiers and printers, and was able to have control of their keyboards, was able to plug things in. And in that case, we actually recorded the engagement because he was wearing a wrist watch that had a camera in it, also a lapel camera, and then a USB kind of a brick like plugs into your cell phone that was HD sound and video. So we were able to record that interaction. And basically social engineering always works. And that's the scary part. And that's one of the reasons we do have these sorts of conversations with people, to understand what the threat is and how you can protect yourself. So in this case, the DNC hack was a case of social engineering. And this is a screenshot of the actual well, not the actual email, but the actual campaign that was used specifically in the DNC hack. So it looks legitimate. It says it's from Google, and it wants you to click here to change your password because they're seeing a bunch of someone's trying to get into your account. So if you click there, what you would end up doing it is then a piece of malware would be downloaded to your computer. Here's another common problem: is these link shorteners, where they take this big long link and they turn it into just a small link that says bit.ly.com/blah blah blah. So actually, these shortened links can lead anywhere, and you wouldn't know it because it's been shortened, and that disguises where the link actually leads to. So avoid those if possible. Specifically, Russian hacking over the years has been called Fancy Bear, or APT. I forget, is APT 35. And this is just names that the antivirus security companies, it's shorthand for the kind of attackers that we see in different campaigns. Fancy Bear is the Russian Advanced Persistent Threat Organization. And more than likely, based upon intelligence, Fancy Bear is both independent actors or independent hackers, as well as I think there's a regiment of the Russian army that engages in hacking. They have their own office space that looks like any corporate office, but instead of doing accounting or payroll or whatever they're doing, they're hacking. So it's very well funded. It's also very well organized. It's not always some kid in the basement drinking Mountain Dew, um, as the common stereotype says. In the case of, does someone have a question?
I don't know that is that
go ahead.
reciprocal? Is that reciprocal? Would you say that we have that same?
I know a very good fact that we have the same same capability,
Mhm.
and we don't. I mean, we're not targeting.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, I mean, we
What-
have a
well,
different
here,
motivation, I'm sure. Mhm.
there's things that we can and I cannot talk about. I
got
will
you.
say that we have a ongoing relationship with Cyber Command, and we do
Okay.
research for Cyber Command, and they're very well. They're. I would say our Cyber Command specifically, and NSA and JHQ Doden, which runs the DoD network, are the best in the world. Yeah, we have these capabilities, and there was some discussion of using them as a response to the Ukrainian invasion. And I'll talk about that later, which, there was cyber options on the table as soon as we started talking about economic sanctions. And the president was presented with several, I know from public sources, from reporting, that were talked about, specifically turning off the power grid in Russia, taking them off the internet, basically shutting down their access to the internet. We also talked about hacking the train switches so that they would not be able to supply or reinforce their forces using rail. But that sort of opens up another question, right? We sort of treat cyber like we have nuclear capability. Since at least since World War II, we both have these weapons of mass destruction, but no one's ever specifically used cyber weapons, except in limited cases. If we switch off the power network in Russia, well, it says they won't switch off our power network, take down our electrical grid. And I'm sure they know something I don't, but apparently they actually have talked about it, and it's probably still on the table, depending on how we move forward. They must know. I don't know what they know, but I'm not sure I'd be talking about these things seriously with the U.S. president without knowing that you had an upper hand somehow in the cyber arena. So in the case of the DNC hack, it was part of a wider campaign in Russia's efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election. This was ordered by Putin himself. And they apparently, according to the assessment of the intelligence agency, wanted President Trump to win. And that's one of the things they did was they leaked information and mainly through WikiLeaks, which is this organization that specializes in publishing stolen information from governments. They sort of say that they're the reformers, but they were actually used in this case to influence our elections in 2016. And these campaigns are ongoing. Every election we see cyber attacks against election organizations. Every year, every day, we're working to secure those systems. And the U.S. election system is secure at this point, based upon what I've seen. We are lucky because, in many ways, mainly because we don't have a centralized election system. You're talking about how do you get down to the county level in order to influence elections. It's hard to do, but they will continue with information, misinformation specifically, mainly through the use of information warfare, My computer stopped working. They're going to use information warfare. Much of the trolling that you've seen is Russian based. Russian trolls are been around for a while. Spreading misinformation. We're pretty sure a lot of the misinformation about COVID vaccines were spread by Russian trolls. Mainly to destabilize the United States. That's part of this whole information warfare campaign. And it's sad because as a country, we seem to be less and less likely to use critical thinking to figure out what's correct and what's incorrect, even with the coverage of the ongoing invasion in Ukraine. We've seen misinformation being spread on Twitter, on Facebook, and all kinds of different places, mainly just so that they can sort of put a smoke screen up about what's actually going on in Ukraine. So let's look specifically at a case study. This is a use of Fancy Bear, which is the Russian threat actors, against it was against field artillery units. There was an app they used in order to target their artillery. The Russians were able to infiltrate that app through an update, which was not legit. And they were able to figure out where these units were based upon the use of the app, and then preemptively take out these units before they could even fire the first shot. There's estimated that only over 9,000 artillery pieces were lost, and also there was a major loss of life. So this is how it happens. Successful deployment of Fancy Bear malware within the application may have facilitated reconnaissance against Ukrainian troops. So it could retrieve information, come up with a location of where they were, and it more than likely spied on their communications as well. So text messages, phone calls, etc. So as a result, open source reporting indicates Ukraine artillery forces lost over 50% of their weapons in the 2 years of the conflict. This is the first conflict. In that case specifically, Ukrainians were fighting Russian-backed separatists. They have been for a while. And this is based upon the CrowdStrike report. So this is published in the Journal of Applied Digital Evidence. If you want to see the full, the full paper. It's been downloaded a number of times. I'm surprised it's not being downloaded more right now, to be honest with you. It's been downloaded a number of times. This actual screenshot's pretty old. It's in the thousands now. I'm actually getting ready to republish it on Medium in the hopes that it will reach a wider audience, especially in light of what's going on now in Ukraine. But probably more than likely what I need to do is update this in some way and add to it. So any questions about any of that? Have I bored you all to death yet?
No, I will comment about the AT&T. Oh, let me turn my camera on. Once a month, and it seems like, is it their schedule? My husband pays the bill, but it is in my name. I get this text message that you're eligible for blah, blah, blah. I never click on, I'm like, that is not real. It looks real.
It's not
real. It looks legit. It comes to my text, comes to my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it looks real. And I'm like, no,
yeah,
it's not
called,
this.
That's what we call smishing, where someone's sending you a text message that contains a malicious link. And so if you click on that, it can infect your phone. And then they have full access of your phone, basically.
That's their goal, to get access to your information that you store on your phone.
Right. And then you can pivot that onto your other electronic devices if they're very persistent, or if they're, if they're, you have to remember attackers have all the time in the world. Defenders can be wrong once, and it, that's the sort of battle we're fighting, is that we've got well-funded organizations out there that are hacking, that are doing things to destabilize our government, to steal our personal information, our financial information. And most organizations have very small cybersecurity budgets. Many organizations see them as cost centers instead of investments. Marshall University has a team of 2 or 3, I believe, that defends the entire network. In many cases, the IT folk are also security folk, and they don't have time to do both sometimes. Their job is to keep things running, and keeping things running isn't always congruent with security. Things like patching, which we all should be doing, becomes a major encumbrance, in that you have to stay up with the patches that are being pushed down, not only for your operating system, but for each one of the applications. Large or even small, medium-sized business, people may miss a patch, and it may be critical. And then that can be used by an attacker to leverage some piece of malware against the organization. And this is true if your personal devices too. Make sure they're up to date as possible, that you're running some sort of security software. In the case of Windows, it's now built in. And I would argue that you really don't need to do more than what Windows does by default on newer installations of Windows. You can spend money on antiviruses, but probably what will happen is they'll butt heads, which slows down your computer. And cyber gangs, and also in the case of cyber warfare, one of the things they're looking to do is to infect your personal devices to use them in botnets. So they can take the combined power of your computer, my mom's computer, maybe a computer here at Marshall, and you can use it for things like denial of service attacks, which we recently saw in Ukraine. Where basically they were taking down websites. The biggest fear right now with the whole Ukrainian conflict is if they start using these devices closer to the Polish border. Poland's part of NATO. If there's a cyber attack against NATO, that could possibly invoke Article 5, which means that we are in conflict with Russia because of our alliance. And I think there's a lot of questions about how that will play out based upon the public comments that I've seen coming out. The public comments coming out of the government is that they see that as probably cyber. There would be some sort of cyber repercussion, not a kinetic warfare repercussion or retaliation, I guess.
A question, Bill, earlier when you were talking about these, what these smishing and phishing kind of links look like. I guess a default of mine for a long time after, hearing professionals like you talk about this, don't open, don't click on it, and so forth. I guess the question is, how are legitimate platforms then generally going to communicate? And I know that's proprietary. I mean, everybody's going to do it a different way. But I mean, I guess our default can be, I don't answer anything on the phone. I don't give any information out on the phone, or right. I don't click on, but I guess it's what I'm always in my mind is trying to decipher legitimacy because they're so professional at masking it.
Getting better and better. No, you're right. It's getting better and better. It's hard to determine. All you can do is do the best you can. If you get something from an organization, actually you go to the organization's website and check and see what's going on. Actually log in to the legitimate website to see if there's something that you need to take care of. I haven't answered the phone for years because I don't want to get into a discussion with somebody. I have a student that does this. It's dangerous. He'll answer all these emails or these phone calls. He'll answer them and he'll keep them on the phone for a couple hours. And it affects this Appalachian accent. I ain't doing nothing. What are you doing? And it goes on and on, and it entertains them, I guess, and it keeps the people who are doing it busy, so they can't be out scamming somebody else. But no, you have the right sort of outlook on it. Is be cautious of everything, because I'm sure that I could be fished. I probably have been fished.
Yeah. Recently, I noticed this on I'm still one of those oldsters that uses AOL for my email, and I've noticed that one of the what would you call it? I guess it's phishing, or
Right.
that they keep telling me, oh, your account's going to be discontinued, or we're discontinuing this and that, and I don't have an account that's paid for. I have the free account. So, but
Right.
then I did some few weeks ago. I tried to communicate with AOL directly to say, you're not sending out these kind of things, and I was confirmed that no, it's a.
We get at Marshall, we get a lot of phishing that looks legitimate, because they'll use the legitimate name and email address in some cases. That we're going to delete all of your email because it's taking up too much, but things that the whole idea is to create urgency, so you don't really think before you click. I had a friend, his favorite thing was don't click stuff, except he said it in a much more inappropriate way. And he's absolutely right. I guess it really boils down to don't click stuff. There are ways to legitimize messages. Think before you click. I mean, this all sounds pedantic and like, oh yeah, we've heard this 1,000 times before, but in the end, it takes one attachment or one click in order to compromise the entirety of your life. And I guess that's what you have to think about, is what's at stake.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone have any questions?
The ones we get at work, you mentioned the ones we get here at Marshall, they do look real. They look real.
Yeah, they do.
And then sometimes, and I've learned, thankfully I work around some IT people, and it'll be signed by someone. I'll go to our address book. No. And I just send it over to the IT desk, and then I feel like that they spend all their time trying to catch these criminals to keep us safe, to keep Marshall safe, to keep,
I mean, that's the sad thing. We just talked about how most cybersecurity programs are not well funded, and that's an example here at Marshall. We're doing the best that we can, but we can't spend $40 million on a cybersecurity program. One of the things that you can do is to you can inform people and you can educate people for not a lot of money about the dangers of being online, so that they're aware, and their awareness themselves will actually take up a lot of the slack of having a lot of people or a lot of technology. So I always said, when I was out basically pimping information security awareness programs, especially in my law firm and other organizations, is it saves you money. It increases your production. And it's not a big investment. In many cases, you could do it for no money at all, because I don't charge to come show up and scare to death all your users. But with also, it's not just a matter of scaring people to death. It's a matter of educating them so that they can take their security into their own hands and feel like they have some sort of control over what's going on. And this sort of cyber crazy world that we now live in. You all have your own control over things in that, as far as that goes. I share a couple of links here, and if there's anyone else that have any question, I'm going to try to go back to my website. Here we go. Let's do this. So this is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. This is a United States government agency, mainly for organizations. And right now, CISA is saying shields up because we expect that Russians may turn their offensive cyber operations toward the United States to destabilize us and to disrupt whatever we're trying to do to aid Ukraine. So this is how CISA communicates with critical infrastructure. And basically, CISA is part of DHS. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, they're the people that's in charge of civil cybersecurity. And they do that through information releasing security bulletins. So if you want to know what infrastructure is, there's a link right here that tells you what critical infrastructure is. Oh, for Pete's sake. This is not the link I'm looking for. So it's things like chemical security, federal facility security, communications. Where is the list of infrastructure? This is one of my problems with these sites, is that they don't do the best job of organizing a lot of different information. Anyway, you get the idea. Critical infrastructure is communication systems. It's the banking industry. It's roads. It's waterways. It's all of this is part of critical infrastructure. And CISA is in charge. They made this agency recently. It's not very old, of coordinating all these different parts of infrastructure, where it's cyber infrastructure or hard infrastructure. There's also a public-private partnership called InfraGard with the FBI, which I'm part of, where it's information sharing between people working in private industry, or in my case, the university, with the FBI to try to identify threats and stop them before they become an issue. The other thing that I would share with you is we were talking about how the cyber warfare apply to you personally. This is a release by Ukrainian CERT, which says that they're getting mass phishing in emails targeting private people in Ukraine. And the accounts of Ukrainian military and individuals, Ukrainian military personnel and related individuals in order to try to target and find out where the military personnel is. And this specific threat group is UNC 1151, which is basically it is the Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Belarus, which is allied with the Russians in their current occupation and invasion of Ukraine. Here's one final thing here that I wanted to push out to you all that we talked about a little bit before. This is how you as an individual report cyber complaints. You can file a complaint here, and it's ic3.gov, and you put in the information. So if you got a phishing email, for example, you can go here and report it. They also have links to report suspected terrorism to the FBI.gov, and you can submit a complaint with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children as well through one click. It's the Internet Crime Complaint Center has been around for a while. What they'll try to do is take each individual complaint and compile that to build a case. So if they see a specific campaign, they can investigate it further. Calling 911 if you get a phishing email is not the thing to do. Local law enforcement doesn't really have the resources or the capability to fight international cybercrime. So IC3 is your best resource. I got an email this morning and I thought this was interesting. This is from Robinhood. And it talks about cybersecurity stocks are up. But beyond that, they also talk about cybercrime is a growing business. It's always been a billion-dollar year, multi-billion-dollar business. And attacks have increased 70% in the last year. Data breaches cost companies a record $4.2 million on average. The global cost hacks topped $6 trillion last year and is forecast to hit 10.5 trillion by 2025. And Russia's always been a big player in cybercrime, specifically stealing money, ransomware, and they've had campaigns against FedEx. Has anyone ever got the FedEx text message? Your package is being held. Click here to claim your package. That's also something we see that's been pretty common.
Yeah, just got that recently.
I did too, and I actually thought for a second. I was like,
yeah, I did too, because I was waiting.
I was
for
like, oh no.
I was waiting for a package, and I thought, but no, it wasn't FedEx that I was waiting.
I think that pretty much wraps me up for today. Is give me some specific things you are thinking about, and I can answer for you instead of listening to me talk.
I think one of my biggest questions is, what is there anything we can do? Can you talk about any further about Ukraine and Russia? I know people in Ukraine are making a run on the ATMs, on their banks, which we don't need to do. But is this going to turn into a world war cyber war?
I wish I could answer that question. I hope not. I mean, I hope not. We are very well prepared. I think on the government side, we're not very well prepared on the civil side, because companies are doing the best to make money. They're not, they have budgets for different things, and they've done their best with cybersecurity. I think the government side's done a much better job. But on the civil side, banks are pretty secure. They have to be audited fairly regularly. I believe it's a year or twice a year. One of my arguments about banks is we can secure banking, we can secure voting online. I still have this dream of one day just being able to vote online like they do in other countries. And I know there are threats against that out there, and people would probably question if it was legitimate or not. It will take some time to get there. But it does concern me. I was like yesterday, should I go withdraw all my money out of the bank in cash and fill the car up and start buying food and stocking it in the basement? I mean, to some extent, we should always do some of that. I remember my wife gave me such a hard time during the water crisis. I lived in Charleston because I had all this emergency water and emergency food. She's like, you're never going to use that. You're just wasting money. And then when we had the water crisis and we couldn't drink the water, I was like, see, told you so. So we all should always be ready for an emergency, is what I have to say. I'm not sure we shouldn't panic. We shouldn't panic. I think that's the biggest thing I can say. We've got very, very good people doing this work at a high level. And we'll have to see how it plays out.
My husband's quite like your wife. And when COVID hit, I even said to him, I said, I'm reading things about, toilet paper and napkins and tissues, but especially toilet paper. I said, you might want to start buying some. And he actually listened to me, and he did. So just one at a time. We don't need to have a run on it. And so when things got shut down, and then I had always wanted to have in our basement, in our storage area, a rack of extra food.
Yeah.
And finally, we have that.
I'm going to come to your house.
Yeah, and he actually likes it. He's like, this is kind of nice. We can just go down and get these.
Yeah,
I grew up like that. My mother always had food in the basement, extras, things you get on sale that we'll keep.
great.
And that is, our world is showing us we need to be always
It
a little
doesn't
more prepared.
take to disrupt your life. Think of the derecho. As an example, the water crisis, COVID, or have all been disruptive. And you know, we had to fall back on, in my case, my Boy Scout training, I guess. Be prepared. Um, in information and cybersecurity, and we talk about one is none and two is one. You always have a backup. If you have one and of whatever it is and it becomes inoperable, then you have zero. If you have two as a backup, you're always going to have a backup. The other thing, I guess, in the case of derecho that taught me was don't let my car run to about empty, because gas stations will be closed, and so, you can't drive anywhere, which is kind of a problem. So I try to keep the car relatively gassed up. I think that's going to be an issue moving forward. I think that we are going to be most affected by Ukraine by spike in energy prices. Brent crude, I believe, is over $100 a barrel right now, and it, in a few days to a few weeks, we'll see a probably pretty big spike in gasoline prices. We could see an increase in natural gas prices. We'll see an increase in food prices. So I'm just full of good news today. But yeah,
and that's what I was kind of wanted to jump in, and I think isn't that the interesting sociological issue of this, that the reality is that you see none of our other issues up to this point in time before Russia invaded Ukraine stopped.
right.
And the reality is we have internal in the United States, what you call cyber patriots, hackers that would love to give a lot of information. We have broad misinformation even across our whole socio-political spectrum right now. And so what we've got to do is kind of take, be vigilant, I would
Right.
imagine, and realize what is information, what is truth and information. And already, it's proven that somebody has tried to, for the last several years, get most of us to distrust our government.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a big part of it.
That's what I mean by the sociological impact, and that didn't stop just because Russia invades Ukraine.
Right.
I mean, now it's going to be even more. People are going to start screaming and saying, "Oh my gosh, look at $4
Gallon of gas, yeah.
A gallon of gas. See, that's the problem. That's the problem right there. That's the current administration."
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hear it all the time.
I don't mean to.
No, yeah, I know what you're saying. It's the president's fault. Yeah, the president doesn't control gas prices.
That's right. Well, and that's just an illustration of what I mean by.
So I got a question from the Gilpins. Is cyber attack an act of war? Yes, and that was first talked about in 2010. There's this article in Foreign Affairs, and it's called the Pentagon's New Cyber Strategy, which basically says you drop a bomb down my smokestack, I can retaliate in cyber means. That's how we're going. A kinetic attack can trigger a cyber attack. A cyber attack on us could trigger a kinetic attack or a cyber attack. In the case of a cyber attack against Poland, for example, which would invoke Article 5 of NATO treaty, we could easily get pulled into some sort of cyber warfare that way. The second question, do we increase our security, our personal, by shutting them down when they're not used, when you're not using them? I never turn off my computers because they receive updates. If your computer's off, it can't receive updates. And I don't know that you're doing anything by turning it off per se, because in the background, your computer is always downloading updates, whether it's updates to the antivirus or updates to software. So I just leave mine on. And this has been debated for years. Some people says it's better because, your computer isn't on all the time, but generally what we find with computers, leaving them on is better than turning them off. Sometimes you can turn them off, they don't come back on. Um, and we see that especially with older equipment. So yeah, just leave it on. It's probably the best thing to do. Did I answer the question?
Hey, Bill, in regard to that, the fact that in downloads now or in constant updating and so forth, this whole phenomena of social, so I'm not sure if I have the right terminology, but the social media, my wife and I will often be, like a lot of us will be surprised that we've had a conversation and then all of a sudden our phone will have an ad
Oh
for
yeah.
something we talked about yesterday. It's kind of, so where is that in relation to, I mean, how does that relate to cybersecurity and the whole realm in which you live?
Privacy is important as well as security. The problem we have with social media, especially giants such as Facebook, is they have these applications that have requested access to our microphone or our camera, and we've granted it without thinking about it. Your phone's listening to you. In many cases, if you have a new smart television, your television is listening to you. And it takes that data and then aggregates it. You are the product at this point.
Yeah, that's right. That's
You
right.
get free social media because they're taking this consumer data, aggregating it, and then selling it. You're selling this app back out. But it always freaks me out. And even though I know that's what's going on, you have one small conversation about something and then you're getting ads for it.
Oh, yeah.
It's really weird, but it's
It is weird.
Facebook, it's Google, it's now Twitter to some extent, Snapchat, TikTok. All these companies are basically taking personal information about you and then selling it to make money, and that's the reason that those services are free.
Mhm.
And it's very creepy. And there's been a lot of hearings on Capitol Hill. The Justice Department's looked into this, what could be done. The FTC is really the point governmental agency that looks at privacy. And sometimes big social media giants have been fined for various breaches of consumer protection laws, or collecting information without your knowledge, which happens all the time. Then the other one is, it's like, do you want to be able to use your microphone to make calls on this application? And of course you're going to go, yeah. Or do you want to be able to post pictures to Twitter or Facebook? And of course you're going to say yes. And that gives them access basically to everything else.
Thank you.
Now that I've bummed everybody out,
Well, and which is why we don't let, our daughter is 12, almost 13, and we don't allow her to use social media.
That's a good idea.
Her friends are on social media. Some of them have Instagram accounts. They have iPhones. She has an iPad, and through family sharing, I found out about here at work, and that iPad's locked down. She can't add anything without my permission. She can get on her Learning Ally, which is her audiobooks.
Right.
And she's not getting an iPhone anytime soon. If she gets one, it'll only be to call. She has a Gizmo watch. She can call us on 10 pre-select numbers we can put into it. And I know I'm probably the meanest mom in the world, but and she understands that it's not for punishment, but I have to protect her.
Oh, exactly. I mean, the other thing that I deal with just off the top of my head is predators, specifically pedophiles. We run an open source operation here, which is basically collecting information on the internet with an organization called OUR, Operation Underground Railroad, which was founded by a former DHS agent who would go in to work on operations in places overseas, but he didn't have the authority to save children. they could, they could bust people and bring them back on the charges that they were facing in the United States. But in the meantime, they were trafficking children in the foreign country. So he retired and founded this organization that goes and rescues children and put the bad guys in jail. And we've been directly involved in these in these operations in various countries, um, in the Far East, in Central and South America, in Mexico, where we help gather the information, the open source information about the targets so that they can go in boots on the ground with local law enforcement agency and break up these organizations. And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but we've probably rescued 80 children and put probably 30, 40 people in jail. And of course, we're not directly interacting with any of these people. We're just going out and we're looking at their Facebook, trying to figure out where they are. We can go out and look like business records, anything that's open source we can use in order to help this organization track down and prosecute these people. On a personal note, I'm involved with another organization that does the same thing. In this case, they use people who do information security for a living, like myself, to do the same sort of work. It's called the Innocence Project. They've been around for probably the last 2 or 3 years, and they work with domestic law enforcement. And I don't really know what their figures are off the top of my head, but they're also very quiet about what they do because they don't want to be targeted by these organizations. Most of the time are criminal organizations targeted through cyber attack, or who knows, I mean, what they would do in order to protect their criminal organizations. So we don't talk a lot about what we do in those two cases, but there is if you go on Google and look for OUR Marshall University, I'm sure you'll find a press release about one of our operations where we rescued some children and put some bad people behind bars.
Amazing. We found out through her school that a friend at school showed her how to get on Pinterest, and she used Pinterest for ideas, and I was okay with that. But then her friend showed her how you could talk to people. We had no idea. And I had to have that talk with my 12-year-old about just human trafficking, and it was a pretty blunt conversation. I put enough fear in her, and it was real fear. I wasn't making things up.
Yeah. And
she, I think, is relieved that we're on top of this. And again, the iPad is locked down. She has to use it for her. She's dyslexic, and so she uses a program with all her audiobooks on it.
I'm dyslexic too, so I understand.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, I can talk a lot about dyslexia, but anyway, so her iPad is her lifeline to reading because it's all audio and the words come up on the screen. And I do allow that. And then I can lock it down from like 10 o'clock till 7 o'clock the next morning. I do that, but I put some fear in her, and it worked because she wants no part of social media. She's okay with not getting a phone yet, or she's not going to get one yet, but whatever.
I think you're lucky because you have a good kid. Sometimes there is a lot of rebellion, especially at certain ages, and they'll go online and bully each other. That's one of the things that I've had to deal with in the past, is in cases. In one case, I had to actually track down the bully and using IP addresses and report him to local law enforcement. And of course, he was just a kid. They went and scared him to death. But still, I mean, this girl was on the edge of God knows what she would have done. It was just destroying her life. And it's the other thing I guess we fight with children beyond being trafficked, is that they're not very nice to each other, and it's led to an increase in teenage suicide. So I've been bullied online.
Oh.
So I understand where they're coming from. So yeah.
My goal is to protect her as much as I can, as long as I can.
You're doing a great job. I'd say everything you've done is perfect.
Well,
you should go out and talk to other parents about what you've done, because it's textbook basically what you should do.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Dr. Wilson, any closing thoughts?
Just thank you so much. Gosh, this has just been wonderful, Bill. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you all for the opportunity.
Okay.
We've learned a lot, and you've given us 2 sessions, and this is recorded so we can go back and look at it again, and our members who couldn't be on can go back and look at it. So thank you so much for Mr.
welcome.
Gardner for doing this for us and for what you do here at Marshall. I feel pretty good working here that, you know, we're looking out for each other, and especially the computer people and what you do. You're doing your best. That's all you
Thank
can
you.
ask for.
Thank you very much.
All right.